managing money. Now, Barry, many times, as I understand, when you work with this chapter, managing money, you're working with congregations and in the corporate setting,
Ministries, yeah,
ministries.
organizations.
And as I hear that, and as I think about that, and I am thinking the one principle that I have always suggested to my blind leaders in Lutheran Blind Mission at the outreach centers is not that you're incapable of managing money, but why do it when you have other people? That's why we have volunteers, sighted volunteers and other people. That's why we link up with the church. Let them deal with the money management so that then you who are blind can be free to deal with the people management and the other things, especially to share Jesus. Why be tangled up? Because money can get one tangled up, can't they?
Yes, it can. And the Bible warns us about that. And in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, Jesus said, you cannot serve both God and money. And so money can become an obstacle in terms of ministry. If we become more fascinated or interested in money than actually doing ministry.
So how about, Barry, if it's possible, might be a stretch for you, but how about you've got some good principles here on managing money and how to deal with it. Basic principles that you use for congregation, but I'm guessing they're good principles that individuals might use, or they might think about how it might help the greater good as well.
Well, some are and some aren't. A lot of the principles we teach in here have to do with recording of money coming into the church and how it's spent, and that's more organizational
Okay,
management. But yet, some of the key principles of Scripture do help us learn. What about on a personal level?
let's
How
do
can
that.
we be better at managing the money that God has given us? Well,
Let's
first thing we have to recognize is that money, everything we have, comes from God.
Okay.
You know, there's James, book of James says, every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above. That's James 1:17. And so we have to recognize that even our income, our clothing, our homes, whatever we have, it's all from God. God provides for all of us. And that's something we always have to keep in the back of our mind. Because when we think of money, we like to think that we either earn our money or we had to do something to get it, we deserve it. No, this is God's gift to us. And so whatever we receive from what we do, from whatever sources, is God's gift to us. And so we need to use that wisely. And one of the key principles here of using that money is that if we misuse it, it's like dishonoring God because He's given us something and then we use it on things that are frivolous. Let's say, for example, we have income, and maybe you don't have a lot of income, but you spend it on cigarettes or alcohol, and instead of buying food or having a place to live or having a telephone that works, that would be misusing some of God's gifts to you and His money to you.
That's an interesting concept, a wonderful principle. It's God's gift to you. Manage God's gifts correctly.
Yes,
Mm.
and or at least God gives us those gifts to glorify God,
Mm-hmm.
and so we glorify God when we use them for what we truly need, not for what we want.
Okay.
Not to go out and buy lottery tickets so we can hopefully one day become, really wealthy. Because just, people who have money doesn't necessarily mean they're happy. I've traveled all over the world
Mm-hmm.
in some of the poorest countries in the world, and I can tell you, Americans are less happy than people who live in the Philippines who have nothing. And the reason is because money it does not make us happy. It doesn't provide, the joys that we think it does. And that we need to be content with what God gives us, and we need to be content with our relationship with God and having family, and start thanking God for things that we have rather than worrying about what we don't have.
I think that's a profound comment you made. I want to just make sure I heard that correctly. So those in the Philippines who are very poor, they're content
Yes.
compared to, and I know people, and I think we all know people in the United States who have big houses. They're almost, one or two people wandering around these mansions and cars and huge incomes, and they're unhappy.
Right. And I think human nature is also uh, evolves in all of us to the point where, no matter how much money we have, it'll never be enough.
So if I have $600, 6,000, 600,000, 6 million, It's never enough.
Right, because if you have 600, you
Ah.
say, oh man, if I only had 700. Well, now once you get to 700, you say to yourself, oh man, if I only had 800. And we all
Mm.
do this. The rich, the poor, everybody plays this game because we have not learned to be content with what God has given us.
Interesting.
And that's an important biblical principle that the Apostle Paul talked about. He talked about being content in whatever situation that he
Mm-hmm.
found himself in.
Mm-hmm.
Whether he was rich or poor, slave or free, whatever the situation, he learned to be content. And that
Hmm.
is, he was content in his relationship with God and who he was. And he didn't worry about what he didn't have, but he focused on the things that he did have.
And I would guess you could add with that and thank the Lord for what he had.
Hmm.
But then also, it sounds like you're alluding to sometimes we think happiness comes from the things we have, but really happiness comes from being content with just what we have.
Right. And a lot of times contentment can be found in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a relationship with God, a relationship with your family, a relationship with friends, having people that care about you. That's far more important than money.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the reasons why managing money and handling it well is so important so that we can honor God, and also recognizing that um, misuse of money can
Mm-hmm.
lead to lots of problems.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, sometimes in our attempt to get more money, some people turn to gambling
Mm.
and they can waste their money rather than using it to provide for their own families.
Okay.
So that it can lead us into sin. It can destroy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We also know that the power of money over people is well documented.
Mm.
Here's an interesting story. I once read a survey, or read a story about a survey of all these people that won big in the lotteries.
Okay.
Okay, people that won in excess of $1 million in lotteries. They surveyed all of them to find out what happened to their lives as a result of winning the lottery.
Okay.
What they discovered is that every single person in the survey ended up worse off than before they had the money.
Worse than
Right,
before.
because they started making bad decisions and bad investments. They didn't know how to handle
Bad
the wealth.
decisions.
What does the Bible say? Why should, if you can't handle
A
riches,
small amount.
small amount, why should I give you something bigger? If you can't
Big
handle riches
amounts.
on earth, why should I give you something in heaven? Spiritual
Hmm.
things to manage. So it's shown that people can't handle money. We
Huh.
just can't if that's our focus.
If that's the focus.
And also it doesn't make us happy to have more money because people who have more money seem to want more money,
Hmm.
don't they? Think about people like Donald Trump or Warren Buffett. You can think of all these rich people who continue to pursue more money even though they have billions and billions of dollars.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to you or me. We would love to sit and grab some
Oh.
of the coins that fall off their table, wouldn't we?
Hmm.
But so
After hearing what
money,
you're saying, I'm not so sure I should. Maybe I should just be content with what I have.
yeah, we need to learn to be content to realize that money is not the answer. Money can certainly provide lots of things for us, but if that's our focus and God is not our focus, we will not be content.
If that's our focus, rather than God being our focus, we will not be content. So the key to being content with what you have is focusing in on God.
Right.
Understanding that life isn't circumstances, what we wear, the things money can buy,
Right.
the things we do, but rather life knowing Jesus and that He's with us no matter what our earthly circumstances.
That's correct. I like one of the things that Jesus said, and I believe it's in the book of Matthew, where he says, a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.
Mm.
This is not about getting the most out of life. It's about experiencing life and experiencing the contentment that only God and Jesus Christ can give us. And so when we manage money, we just need to make sure that we are not pursuing money, because to pursue money is to pursue a false god. It can become an idol or something that we worship.
And there's another verse, we cannot serve both God and mammon, or money, it's sometimes translated, one or the other.
And the more we focus on money, you know what happens? We become a slave to it.
A slave.
And Jesus came to set us free.
Those are some mighty challenging but good principles about money. Let me see if I can recap them.
Okay.
Number one, no matter how much money we have, a lot or little, it's a gift of God.
Mm-hmm.
Second, because it's a gift of God, we should be content with what we have.
Yes.
because it is a gift from Him. And if we're not content, really, then we're begrudging, God's not giving me enough.
Yes.
And then we need to look at our heart.
Hmm.
And then the way to focus back properly to be content is our focus not be on money and what it provides, but our focus be on God.
Yes, as the provider.
For if we focus in on money, as you so well pointed out, we become a slave to that money.
Yes, we do. And then we're truly not free. That we do things out of our worship of money and not our worship of God.
So it's far better to be a slave to God, for the Son has set us free, to be free indeed.
Amen.